All right, so here we are at part 5 of the AWS Security Specialty questions, answers, and explanations. We're going to go forward. We have a couple more parts, but I hope you enjoyed this. If you have any questions, drop a comment. You can also drop a like and subscribe. I'll be producing more stuff as we go forward, and I'll make a post about it on the community wall. So here we go. A business requires forensic logging solutions for hundreds of Docker-based apps running on Amazon EC2. The solution must analyze logs in real time, provide message replay, and persist logs, which Amazon Web Service should be employed to satisfy the requirements. Kinesis and Elasticsearch. Kinesis provides real-time log streaming and message replay capabilities, while Elasticsearch, now OpenSearch, offers real-time analytics and log persistence for forensic analysis. The company developed an application using AWS Lambda, S3, SNS, and DynamoDB. An external application puts objects into S3 with date and time tags. A Lambda function pulls data based on tags and inserts values into DynamoDB containing PII. The company must remove data older than 30 days from both S3 and DynamoDB. Which solution provides the most operational efficiency? Create an S3 lifecycle policy to expire objects that are older than 30 days. Update the Lambda function, add the TTL attribute in the DynamoDB table. Enable TTL on the DynamoDB table to expire entries that are older than 30 days based on the TTL attribute. The S3 lifecycle policy automatically handles S3 object deletion, while DynamoDB TTL automatically removes expired items without manual intervention, providing maximum operational efficiency. Companies hosting a static website on S3. The company has configured CloudFront distributions to serve the website contents and associated WAF, WebACL, with the CloudFront distribution for US-only access. The company is worried about the S3 that the URL might be accessible directly and requests can bypass the CloudFront distribution. What combination of steps should the company take to remove that direct access to the S3? Select restrict bucket access in the origin settings of the CloudFront distribution and create an origin access identity for the S3 origin. Creating an OAI and restricting bucket access ensures that the S3 content can only be accessed through CloudFront, preventing direct S3 URL access and maintaining geographic restrictions. The company is testing its incident response plan for compromised credentials. The company runs a database on EC2 instances and stores the sensitive database credentials as a secret in Secrets Manager. The secret is rotation configured with an AWS Lambda function. The EC2 instance and Lambda function are deployed in the same private subnet with a Secrets Manager VC endpoint. An engineer discovers that the secret cannot rotate with error set secret, unable to log into database. What solution will solve this? Ensure the security group attached to the Lambda allows outbound connections to the EC2. Ensure the security group attached to the EC2 allows inbound connections from the security group attached to the Lambda function. The rotation failure occurs because the Lambda function cannot connect to the database on the EC2 due to the security group restrictions. Proper security group configuration allows Lambda to establish database connections for credential rotation. The company is evaluating the use of Systems Manager Session Manager to gain access to the company's EC2s. However, until the company implements the change, the company must protect the key file for the EC2 from read and write operations by any other users. When a security admin tries to connect to a critical EC2 Linux instance during an emergency, the security admin receives the error unprotected private key file permissions for SSH my _private _key.pem are too open. What commands should the security admin use to modify the private key file permissions to resolve the error? Chmod 0400 ssh/my_private_key.pem. The chmod 0400 command sets read-only permissions for the owner and removes all permissions for group and others, which is the required security standard for SSH private key files. The company is building a data processing application that uses AWS Lambda functions. The application's Lambda functions need to communicate with an Amazon RDS-DB instance that's deployed in a VPC in the same AWS account. What solution meets these requirements the most secure way? Deploy the Lambda function in the VPC. Attach a security group to the Lambda function. Provide outbound rule access to the VPC CIDR range only. Update the database instance security group to allow traffic from the Lambda security group. Deploying a Lambda inside the VPC with properly configured security groups ensures secure, private communication between Lambda and RDS without exposing the database to public access. A company has an app that uses Amazon RDS PostgreSQL database. The company is developing an app feature that will store sensitive information for an individual in the database. During a security review, the company discovers the RDS database instance is not encrypting data at rest. The company needs a solution that will provide encryption at rest for all existing data and for new data. What options can the company use to meet the requirements? Create a snapshot of the database instance, copy the snapshot to a new snapshot, and enable encryption for the copy process. Use the new snapshot to restore the database instance and use Key Management Service, KMS, to create a new CMK. Select this key as the encryption key for the operations with RDS. RDS encryption cannot be enabled on an existing unencrypted instance. The snapshot, copy, restore process with encryption enabled is the only way to encrypt existing data, and a customer-managed KMS key provides better control over encryption operations. Security engineer needs to implement a write once, read many worm model for data that a company will store in S3 buckets. The company uses the S3 standard storage class for all of its S3 buckets. The security engineer must ensure that objects cannot be overwritten or deleted by any user, including the account root user. What solution meets the requirements? Create a new S3 bucket with S3 object lock enabled in compliance mode. Place objects in the S3 buckets. S3 object lock in compliance mode provides worm functionality where objects cannot be deleted or overwritten by any user, including the root user, until the retention period expires. The development team is attempting to encrypt and decode a secure string parameter from Systems Manager Parameter Store using an AWS Key Management Service, CMK. However, each attempt results in an error message. Which related problems possibly account for the error? The CMK used in the attempt does not exist, and the CMK used in the attempt is not enabled. KMS operations will fail if the specific key doesn't exist or if the key is disabled. Both conditions prevent successful encryption-decryption operations with parameter store. A security engineer logs into the AWS Lambda console with admin permissions and is trying to view logs in Amazon CloudWatch for Lambda function named MyFunction. When choosing the option in the Lambda console to view logs in CloudWatch, an error loading log streams message appears. How should the security engineer correct the error? Add the logs create log stream action to the second allow statement. The Lambda execution role needs logs create log stream permission to create new log streams in CloudWatch logs when the function executes and generates log output. A company plans to create individual trial accounts with an existing organization and organizations for each of its DevOps teams. AWS CloudTrail has been enabled and configured on all accounts to write logs to an S3 bucket in a centralized AWS account. A security engineer needs to ensure that DevOps team members are unable to modify or disable this configuration. How can the security engineer meet the requirements? Create a service control policy that prohibits changes to the specific CloudTrail trail and apply the SCP to the appropriate organizational unit or accounts in organizations. Service control policies at the organization level can prevent member accounts from modifying or disabling CloudTrail configurations, ensuring audit trail integrity across all accounts. The company uses Amazon RDS for MySQL as a database engine for its application. A recent security audit revealed an RDS instance that is not compliant with company policy for encrypting data at rest. A security engineer needs to ensure that all existing RDS databases are encrypted using server-side encryption and that any future deviations from the policy are detected. What combination of steps should the security engineer take? Create a config rule to detect the creation of encrypted RDS databases. Create an EventBridge rule to trigger on the config rule's compliance state change and use SNS to notify the security operations team, and take a snapshot of the unencrypted RDS database. Copy the snapshot, enable the snapshot encryption in the process, restore the database instance from the newly created encrypted snapshot, terminate the unencrypted database instance. Config monitors compliance with encryption requirements, and EventBridge automates notifications when violations occur. The snapshot copy restore process is the only way to encrypt existing unencrypted RDS instances. A company has a large fleet of Linux Amazon EC2 instances and Windows EC2 instances that run in private subnets. The company wants all remote admin to be performed as securely as possible in the cloud. What solution meets the requirements? Don't use SSH RSA private keys during the launch of a new instance. Implement Systems Manager, Sessions Manager. Sessions Manager provides secure, auditable shell access to EC2s without requiring SSH keys, inbound security group rules, or bastion hosts, making it the most secure option for remote administration. A company has an AWS Lambda function that creates image thumbnails from larger images. The Lambda function needs read and write access to an Amazon S3 bucket in the same AWS account. What solution will provide the Lambda function this access? Create an IAM role for the Lambda function, attach an IAM policy that allows access to the S3 bucket, and create an IAM role for the Lambda function. Attach a bucket policy to the S3 bucket to allow access. Specify the function's IAM role as the principal. Lambda functions should use IAM roles rather than embedded credentials. Access can be granted through either IAM policies attached to that role or S3 bucket policies that specify the Lambda role as the principal. A security engineer is designing an IAM policy for a script that will use the AWS CLI. The script currently assumes an IAM role attached to 3 managed IAM policies: Amazon EC2 Full Access, Amazon DynamoDB Full Access, and Amazon VPC Full Access. The security engineer needs to construct a least privilege IAM policy to replace these managed policies. What solution meets these requirements in the most operationally efficient way? In CloudTrail, create a trail for management events. Run the script with the existing AWS managed IAM policy. You use IAM Access Analyzer to generate a new IAM policy based on access activity in the trail. Replace the existing managed IAM policies with the generated IAM policy for the role. IAM Access Analyzer can analyze CloudTrail logs to determine which permissions are actually used by the script and generate a least privilege policy, providing the most operationally efficient approach to policy refinement. A company that uses AWS organizations wants to see Security Hub findings from many AWS accounts and regions. Some accounts are in the company's organization, and some accounts are in organizations that the company manages for customers. Although the company can see findings in Security Hub admin accounts for accounts in the company's organization, there are no findings from accounts in other organizations. What combination should the company take to see findings from accounts outside the organization? Send an administration request from the member accounts and send invitations to accounts that are outside the company's organizations from Security Hub admin account. For accounts outside the organization, Security Hub requires manual invitation and acceptance processes rather than automatic enrollment available for accounts within the same organization. A company hosts a web app on an Apache server running on EC2 instances in an auto-scaling group. The company configured the EC2s to send Apache web server logs to CloudWatch Logs group, configured to expire after 1 year. Recently, the company discovered that specific IP is sending suspicious requests. A security engineer wants to analyze the past week of Apache server logs to determine how many requests the IP address sent and corresponding URLs requested. What should the security engineer do with the least effort? Use CloudWatch Logs Insights and a custom query syntax to analyze the CloudWatch logs for the specific IP address and the requested URLs. CloudWatch Logs Insights provides built-in query capabilities to analyze log data directly without requiring data export or additional services, making it the most efficient solution for this analysis. A company has multiple S3 buckets encrypted with customer-managed CMKs. Due to regulatory requirements, the keys must be rotated every year. The company's security engineer has enabled automatic key rotation for the CMKs. However, the company wants to verify that the rotation has occurred. What should the security engineer do to accomplish this? Filter AWS CloudTrail logs for key rotation events. CloudTrail logs capture KMS key rotation events, providing an audit trail to verify the automatic key rotation has occurred as required by regulatory compliance. A company has implemented WAF and CloudFront for an application. The app runs on EC2 instances that are part of an auto-scaling group behind an application load balancer. The WAF web app uses Managed Rules rule group and is associated with the CloudFront distribution. CloudFront uses the ALB as the distribution's origin. During a security review, a security engineer discovers the infrastructure is susceptible to a large Layer 7 DDoS attack. How can the engineer improve the security at the edge to defend against this type of attack? Configure WAF with a rate-based rule that imposes a rate limit that automatically blocks requests when the rate limit is exceeded. Rate-based rules in WAF automatically track request rates from IP addresses and block traffic when thresholds are exceeded, providing effective protection against Layer 7 DDoS attacks at the edge. The company has multiple accounts in the cloud. Users in the developer account need to have access to specific resources in the production account. What's the most secure way to provide this access? Create cross-account access with an IAM role in the production account. Grant the appropriate missions to this role. Allow users in the developer account to assume this role to access production resources. Cross-account IAM roles provide secure access without sharing credentials. The role resides in the resource account, production, and can be assumed by trusted principals from other accounts. GuardDuty has detected communications to an unknown command and control endpoint from a company's EC2 instance. The instance was found to be running a vulnerable version of a common web framework. The company's security operations team wants to quickly identify other compute resources with the specific version of that framework installed. What approach should the team take to accomplish this? Scan all EC2s with Systems Manager to identify vulnerable versions of the web framework. Systems Manager inventory can collect software information from EC2s, including application versions, allowing quick identification of vulnerable frameworks across the fleet. The company stores sensitive documents in S3 using server-side encryption with AWS KMS CMK. A new requirement mandates that the CMK used for these documents can be used only for S3 actions. What statement should the company add to the key policy to meet the requirement? Add a condition that restricts the key usage to S3 server actions only. Key policies can include conditions that restrict key usage to specific AWS services, ensuring the CMK can only be used for S3 operations and not other AWS services. The company finds that one of its EC2s suddenly has a high CPU usage. The company doesn't know whether the EC2 instance is compromised or whether the operation is performing background cleanup. Which combination of steps should a security engineer take before investigating? Enable termination protection for the EC2 if termination protection hasn't been enabled. Take snapshots of the EBS data volumes attached to the EC2 and capture the EC2 instance metadata, and then tag the EC2 as under quarantine. Before investigation, preserve evidence by enabling termination protection, creating EBS snapshots for forensic analysis, and capturing metadata while quarantining the instance to prevent evidence tampering. The company hosts an application on EC2 that is subject to specific rules for regulatory compliance. One rule states that traffic to and from the workload must be inspected for network-level attacks. This involves inspecting the whole packet. The security engineer must install intrusion detection software on a C5N 4x large EC2 and configure it to monitor traffic to and from the app instances. What should the engineer do next? Configure VPC traffic mirroring to send traffic to the monitoring EC2 using a network load balancer. VPC traffic mirroring copies network traffic from the EC2 instances to monitoring tools, enabling deep packet inspection security analysis without impacting application performance. The company has a relational database workload that runs on Aurora MySQL. According to new compliance standards, the company must rotate all database credentials every 30 days. The company needs a solution that maximizes security and minimizes development effort. What solution meets the requirements? Store the credentials in Secrets Manager. Configure automatic credential rotation every 30 days. Secrets Manager provides a built-in automatic rotation for Aurora MySQL credentials, handling the entire rotation process securely without manual intervention or custom development. A company uses organizations to manage a small number of AWS accounts. However, the company plans to add 1,000 more accounts soon. The company allows only a centralized security team to create IAM roles for all AWS accounts and teams. Applications teams submit requests for IAM roles to the security team, but there's a backlog. The security team must create a process that allows application teams to provision their own IAM roles while limiting scope and preventing privilege escalation. What solution meets these requirements with least operational overhead? Create a service control policy and a permissions boundary for IAM roles. Add this SCP to the root organization unit so that only roles that have the permissions boundary attached can create any new IAM roles. So using SCPs with permissions boundary allows delegated IAM role creation while enforcing maximum permission limits, preventing privilege escalation and reducing operational overhead. A company's security engineer is developing an incident response plan to detect suspicious activity in an AWS account for VPC hosted resources. The security engineer needs to provide visibility for as many regions as possible. What combination of steps meets these requirements? Activate GuardDuty across all regions and create a SNS topic. Create an EventBridge rule that responds to findings and publishes the findings to the SNS topic. GuardDuty provides threat detection across all regions with regional pricing, while EventBridge and SNS offer cost-effective alerting for security findings without additional infrastructure costs. A team is using Secrets Manager to store an application database password. Only a limited number of IAM principals within the account can have access to the secret. The principals who require access to the secret change frequently. A security engineer must create a solution that maximizes flexibility and scalability. What solution meets this? Use a tag-based approach by attaching a resource policy to the secret. Apply tags to the secret and the IAM principals. Use the AWS principal tag and AWS resource tag IAM condition keys to control access. Tag-based access control using resource policies with condition keys provides flexible, scalable access management without requiring frequent policy updates as principals change. A company uses organizations to run workloads in multiple AWS accounts. Currently, individual team members access all Amazon EC2 instances remotely using SSH or RDP. The company doesn't have audit trails and security groups are occasionally open. The company must secure access management and implement centralized logging. What solution meets these requirements most securely? Replace SSH and RDP with Systems Manager Session Manager. Install a Systems Manager agent, SSM, agent on the instances. Attach the Amazon SSM Managed Instance Core role to the instances. Configure session data streaming to CloudWatch Logs and create a separate logging account that has appropriate cross-account permissions to audit the log data. Sessions Manager eliminates the need for SSH RDP access while providing comprehensive audit logging. Centralized logging in a separate account ensures log integrity and security. A company became aware that one of its access keys was exposed on a code-sharing website 11 days ago. A security engineer must review all the exposed access keys to determine the extent of the exposure. The company enabled AWS CloudTrail in all regions when it opened the account. Which of the following what allows the engineer to complete the task? Filter the event history on the exposed access key in the CloudTrail console. Examine the data from the past 11 days. Cloud Event History provides 90 days of management events that can be filtered by Access Key ID, allowing quick identification of all API calls made with the compromised credentials. An app team wants to use Certificate Manager to request public certificates to ensure that data is secured in transit. The domains being used are not currently hosted on Route 53. The team wants to use a managed distribution and caching solution to optimize requests and provide better points of presence to customers. The distribution solution will use a primary domain name that's customized and several alternative domain names. The certificates must renew automatically over an indefinite period of time. What are the steps that should be taken to deploy this architecture? Request validation of the domains for ACM through DNS. Insert the CNAME records into each domain's DNS zone and create an Amazon CloudFront distribution for the cloud caching solution. Enter the main CNAME record as the origin name. Enter the subdomain names or alternate names in the alternate domain names distribution settings. Select the newly requested certificate from ACM to be used for secure connections and request a certificate from ACM in US East 1 and add the domain names that the certificate will secure. CloudFront requires certificates in US East 1. DNS validation enables automatic renewal without email validation. And then CloudFront will provide the managed distribution and caching solution. The company uses API Gateway to present REST APIs to users. An API developer wants to analyze API access patterns without the need to parse log files. What steps will meet these requirements with least effort? Configure access logging for required API stage and use CloudWatch Logs Insights to analyze API access information. API Gateway Access Logging combined with CloudWatch Logs Insights provides a structured log analysis without manual parsing, offering query capabilities for pattern access. Multiple apps are hosted in a VPC. During monitoring, multiple port scans are coming from a specific IP address block. The internal security team has requested that all offending IP addresses be denied for the next 24 hours. What method will quickly and temporarily deny access from the specified IP address? Modify the NACLs associated with all public subnets in the VPC to deny access from the IP address block. NACLs operate at the subnet level and can quickly block IP ranges with explicit deny rules that take precedence over allow rules, providing immediate protection. A company needs to store multiple years of financial records. The company wants to use Amazon S3 to store copies of the documents. The company must implement a solution to prevent the documents from being edited, replaced, or deleted for 7 years after the documents are stored in S3. The solution must also encrypt the documents at rest. What should the engineer do? Configure S3 server-side encryption, configure S3 versioning on the bucket, configure S3 object lock to use compliance mode with a retention period of 7 years. Object lock in compliance mode provides worm functionality, preventing deletion or modification. Versioning and server-side encryption complete the solution for regulatory compliance. There's a requirement for a company to transfer large amounts of data between AWS and on-prem locations. There's an additional requirement for low latency and high consistency traffic to AWS. How would you design this hybrid architecture? Provision a direct connection to an AWS region using a direct connect partner. Direct Connect provides dedicated network connections from on-prem to AWS, offering consistent network performance and reduced data transfer costs for large volumes. The company uses a third-party identity provider with a SAML-based SSO for its accounts. After the third-party identity provider renewed an expired signing certificate, users saw the error response signature invalid. A security engineer needs to provide a solution that corrects the error and minimizes operational overhead. What solution does this? Download the updated SAML metadata file from the identity service provider. Update the file in AWS Identity Provider entity defined in AWS Identity and Access Management using the AWS CLI. SAML metadata contains the updated signing certificate. Updating the metadata file in the IAM Identity Provider resolves signature validation errors after certificate renewal. Security engineer needs to implement a write once, read many model for data that a company will store in S3 buckets. The security engineer must ensure the buckets cannot be overwritten or deleted by any user, including the account root user. What solution does this? Create new S3s with S3 object lock enabled in compliance mode and place objects in S3 bucket. Object lock in compliance mode provides worm functionality where objects cannot be deleted or overwritten by any user, including the root user, until retention expires. An audit determined that a company's EC2 instance security group violated company policy by allowing unrestricted incoming SSH traffic. A security engineer must implement a near real-time monitoring and alerting solution that will notify administrators of such violations. What solution meets these requirements with the most operational efficiency? Use the restricted SSH AWS config managed rule that's invoked by a security group configuration changes that are not compliant. Use the config remediation feature to publish a message to SNS topics. The config restricted SSH managed rule automatically detects security groups allowing unrestricted SSH access and can trigger an SNS notification for immediate alerting. Company is using an ECS to deploy an application that deals with sensitive data. During a recent security audit, the company identified a security issue where Amazon RDS credentials are stored with application code in the source code repo. A security engineer needs to develop a solution to ensure the database credentials are stored securely and rotated periodically, accessible only to the application while preventing database admins from sharing credentials as plain text. The solution must minimize admin overhead. What solution does this? Use Secrets Manager to store the database credentials. Use IAM roles for ECS tasks to restrict access to database credentials to specific containers only. Secrets Manager provides secure credential storage with automatic rotation, while ECS task roles ensure only authorized containers can access credentials without embedding them in code. A company discovers a billing anomaly in its AWS account. A security consultant investigates and discovers an employee who left the company 30 days ago still has access to the account. The company has not monitored account activity in the past. The security consultant needs to determine which resources have been deployed or reconfigured by the employee as quickly as possible. What solution does this? In CloudTrail, filter the event history to display results from the past 30 days. Create an Athena table that contains the data, partition the table by event source. CloudTrail event history provides a complete audit trail of API calls. Using Athena allows for efficient querying of large CloudTrail datasets to identify specific user activities. The company wants to monitor the deletion of KMS customer managed keys. The security engineer needs to create an alarm that will notify the company before a KMS key is deleted. The security engineer has configured the integration of CloudTrail with CloudWatch. What should the engineer do next to meet the requirements? Create an EventBridge rule to detect KMS API calls of disable key and schedule key deletion. Create a Lambda function to send an SNS message to the company. Add the Lambda function as the target of the EventBridge rule. EventBridge can detect specific KMS API calls like disable key and schedule key deletion, triggering Lambda functions to send notifications before keys are actually deleted. A company accidentally deleted the private key for an EBS-backed Amazon EC2 instance. The security engineer needs to regain access to the instance. What steps will do this? Stop the instance, detach the root volume, generate a new key pair, and when the volume is detached from the original instance, attach the volume to another instance as a data volume. Modify the authorized keys file with a new public key. Move the volume back to the original instance. Start the instance. By detaching the root volume and attaching it to another instance, you can modify the authorized keys to add a new public key, then reattach the volume to regain access. A company deployed GuardDuty in US East 1 region. The company wants all DNS logs that relate to the company's EC2 instances to be inspected. What should a security engineer do to ensure that the EC2 instances are logged? Use DNS resolvers for all EC2 instances. GuardDuty analyzes DNS logs from DNS resolvers, Route 53 resolver, using external DNS resolvers, using external DNS resolvers prevents GuardDuty from accessing DNS query logs for threat detection. An e-commerce website was down for 1 hour following a DDoS attack. Users were unable to connect during the attack period. The company's security team is worried about future attacks and wants to prepare to minimize downtime. What would help achieve this? Subscribe to AWS Shield Advance and reach out to AWS support in the event of an attack, and use WAF to create rules to respond to such attacks. Shield Advance provides DDoS response team support and advanced protections, while WAF creates application layer filtering rules to block malicious traffic patterns. Security engineer receives an AWS abuse email message indicating that an EC2 instance is sending phishing emails. The EC2 is part of the production application deployed behind an ALB with auto-scaling across multiple AZs. The instances normally communicate over HTTP, HTTPS, and MySQL protocols. The investigation reveals email messages being sent over port 587. The security engineer must contain the compromised instance, preserve forensic evidence, and minimize application downtime. What steps must be taken? Add an outbound rule to the NACL for the subnet that contains the compromised EC2 to deny traffic to all ports, all IPs and port 587, and gather volatile memory from the compromised EC2. Suspend the compromised EC2 from the auto-scaling group. Take a snapshot of the EC2 and replace the existing security group that's attached to the compromised EC2 with a new security group that has no inbound rules or outbound rules. This approach preserves volatile memory first, isolates the instance using security groups and NACLs to prevent further malicious activity while maintaining application availability through auto-scaling. You need to create a policy and apply it for just an individual user. How could you accomplish this in the right way? Add an inline policy for the user. Inline policies are embedded directly in a single user group or role and are ideal for one-to-one relationships where the policy applies to only one entity. Company A has an account named Account A. Company A recently acquired Company B, which has an account named Account B. Company B stores its files in an S3 bucket. The admins need to give a user from Account A full access to the S3 and Account B. After adjusting IAM permissions for the user in Account A to access the S3 Account B, the user cannot access any files. What will resolve this? In Account B, create a bucket policy to allow the user from Account A to access the S3 and Account B. Cross-account S3 access requires both IAM permissions in the source account and a bucket policy in the destination account that explicitly allows external user or role. The company has a web app web-based app using CloudFront and running on ECS behind an application load balancer. The ALB is terminating TLS and balancing load across ECS service tasks. A security engineer needs to design a solution to ensure the application content is accessible only through CloudFront and never directly. How should the engineer build the most secure solution? Add an origin custom header. Set the viewer protocol policy to HTTPS only. Set the origin protocol policy to match viewer. Update the application to validate the CloudFront custom header. The custom origin header that only CloudFront knows, combined with HTTPS only policies and application validation, ensures traffic can only come through CloudFront. Companies using AWS Secrets Manager to store secrets for its production RDS database. The security officer has asked that secrets be rotated every 3 months. What would allow the company to do this securely? Put the RDS instance in a private subnet and an AWS Lambda function in the VPC in the private subnet. Right? Configure the private subnet to use a NAT gateway. Schedule the Lambda function to run every 3 months to rotate the secrets, and replace the RDS instance in a private subnet and an AWS Lambda function inside the VC in a private subnet. Configure a Secrets Manager interface endpoint. Schedule the Lambda function to run every 3 months to rotate the secrets. Both solutions keep RDS in private subnets for security. NAT gateway enables internet access for Lambda to call Secrets Manager API, while VPC endpoints provide private connectivity without internet access. You work at a company that makes use of AWS. One of the key security policies is to ensure that all data is encrypted both at rest and in transit. What are the right ways to implement this? Use S3 SSE, server-side encryption, and use SSL for data in transit. Server-side encryption provides encryption at rest, while SSL TLS ensures data is encrypted during transmission between clients and AWS services. Your company uses AWS to host its resources. They have the following requirements. 1, record all API calls and transitions. 2, help in understanding what resources are there in the account. And 3, the facility to allow auditing credentials and logins. What services would suffice the requirements? CloudTrail, config, and credential reports. CloudTrail records all API calls. Config tracks resource configurations and changes, and IAM credentials reports provide credential usage auditing capabilities. A company is designing a multi-account structure for its development teams using AWS organizations and SSL. The company must implement a solution so that development teams can use only specific AWS regions, and so that each AWS account allows access to only specific AWS services. What solution will meet this with the least operational overhead? Create service control policies that include the condition, resource, and not action elements to allow access to only the regions and services that are needed. SCPs provide centralized governance across multiple accounts with condition-based restrictions on regions and services, minimizing overhead. A company has deployed GuardDuty and now wants to implement automation for potential threats. The company has decided to start with RDP brute force attacks that come from EC2 instances in the company's environment. A security engineer needs to implement a solution that blocks the detected communication from a suspicious instance until investigation can potential remediation can happen. What solution will do this? Enable Security Hub to ingest GuardDuty findings and send the event to EventBridge. Deploy network firewalls. Process the event with a Lambda function that adds a rule to a network firewall policy to block traffic to and from the suspicious instance. This provides automated threat response by integrating GuardDuty findings through Security Hub and EventBridge to trigger Lambda functions that update firewall rules for traffic blocking. Company uses external identity provider to allow federation into different AWS accounts. A security engineer needs to identify the federated user that terminated a production EC2 instance a week ago. What's the fastest way for the security engineer to identify the federated user? Filter the AWS CloudTrail event history for the terminate instances event and identify the assumed IAM role. Review the assumed role with SAML event call in CloudTrail to identify the corresponding username. CloudTrail logs both the terminate instances event and the assume role with SAML event that shows the original federated username, providing the fastest path to identify the user. A website currently runs on EC2 with mostly static content. Recently, the site was subject to a DDoS attack, and a security engineer was tasked with redesigning the edge security to help mitigate this risk in the future. What are the ways the engineer could achieve this? Move the static content to S3, and front this with a CloudFront distribution, and use WAF security rules to inspect the inbound traffic and use Route 53 to distribute traffic. Moving static content to S3 with CloudFront reduces attack surface. WAF provides application layer protection, and Route 53 offers DNS level DDoS protection and traffic distribution. A company needs to use HTTPS when connecting to its web apps to meet compliance requirements. These web apps run in VPC on EC2 instances behind an application load balancer. A security engineer wants to ensure the load balancer will only accept the connections over port 443, even if the load balancer is mistakenly configured with an HTTP listener. Which configuration steps should the engineer take to accomplish the task? Create a security group with a single inbound rule that allows connections from all IPs on port 443. Ensure this security group is the only one associated with the load balancer. By creating a security group that only allows port 443 traffic and ensuring it's the only security group attached to the load balancer, you enforce HTTPS only traffic regardless of any misconfigured listeners, as security groups act as a firewall at the instance level. Example.com is hosted on an EC2 behind an app load balancer. The third-party host intrusion detection system agents that capture the traffic of the EC2 are running on each host. The company must ensure that they are using private enhancing technologies for users without losing the assurance the third-party solution offers. What's the most secure way to meet this? Create a listener on the load balancer that uses encrypted connections with elliptical curve Diffie-Hellman cipher suites, and use encrypted connections to the servers that do not enable perfect forward secrecy. This configuration provides end-to-end encryption while allowing HIDS agents to inspect traffic at the server level. ECDHE provides strong encryption, and disabling PFS on the backend allows HIDS to decrypt and analyze traffic for security monitoring. A company has an AWS key managed service, customer managed key with imported key material. Company policy requires all encryption keys to be rotated every year. What should a security engineer do to meet this requirement? Create a new customer managed key, import the new key material to the new key, and point the key alias to the new key. Keys with imported key material cannot use automatic rotation. Manual rotation requires creating a new key with new key material and updating the alias to point to the new key, ensuring applications continue to work without code changes. The company's on-prem networks are connected to VPCs using Direct Connect Gateway. The company's on-prem applications need to stream data using existing Kinesis Data Firehose delivery stream. The company's security policy requires that data be encrypted in transit using a private network. How should they do this? Create a VPC endpoint for Kinesis Data Firehose. Configure the application to connect to the VPC endpoint. A VPC endpoint for Kinesis Data Firehose allows the on-prem application to access the service privately through Direct Connect connection without traversing the public internet, ensuring data remains encrypted in transit over private networks. Security team is using Amazon EC2 Image Builder to build a hardened AMI with forensic capabilities. An AWS KMS key will encrypt the forensic AMI. EC2 Image Builder successfully installs the required patches and packages in the security team's AWS account. The security team uses a federated IAM role to sign in the AWS Management Console and attempts to launch the forensic AMI. The EC2 instance launches and immediately terminates. What should the team do to launch the EC2 successfully? Update the policy that's associated with the KMS key that's used to encrypt the forensic AMI. Configure the policy to allow KMS encrypt and decrypt actions for the federated IAM role. When launching an encrypted AMI, IAM role must have permissions to decrypt the AMI using the KMS key. The immediate termination indicates the instance cannot decrypt the root volume due to insufficient KMS permissions. A company wants to monitor the deletion of customer-managed CMKs. A security engineer must create an alarm that will notify the CMK is deleted. Security engineer has configured the integration of AWS CloudTrail with CloudWatch. What should the engineer do next to meet the requirements? Create an EventBridge rule to look for API calls of disable key and schedule key deletion. Create an AWS Lambda function to send SNS messages to the company. Add the Lambda function as the target of the EventBridge rule. EventBridge can detect specific KMS API calls from CloudTrail events. Disable key and schedule key deletion are the relevant API calls that occur before actual key deletion, allowing proactive notification through Lambda and SNS. The company is building an application on AWS that will store sensitive information. The company has a support team with access to IT infra, including databases. The company's security engineer must introduce measures to protect the sensitive data against any data breach while minimizing management overhead. The credentials must be regularly rotated. What should the engineer do? Enable Amazon RDS encryption to encrypt the database and snapshots. Enable EBS encryption on the EC2s. Store the database credentials in Secrets Manager with automatic rotation. And set up TLS for the connection to the RDS hosted database. This solution provides comprehensive data protection with encryption at rest with RDS and EBS, secure credential management with automatic secrets rotation and Secrets Manager, and encryption in transit via TLS while minimizing operational overhead. A company deployed AWS organizations to help manage its increasing number of accounts. A security engineer wants to ensure only principals in the org structure can access a specific Amazon bucket. The solution must also minimize operational overhead. What will meet this requirement? Specify the org ID in the global key condition element of a bucket policy, allowing all principals access. Using the AWS principal org ID condition in the S3 bucket policy automatically restricts access to only principals that belong to the specified organization, eliminating the need to manage individual account IDs. A company is undergoing a Layer 3 and Layer 4 DDoS attack on its web servers running on AWS. What combination of services and features will provide protection in this scenario? Route 53, Shield, and Elastic Load Balancer. Route 53 provides DNS-level DDoS protection. Shield offers network and transport layer protection, and load balancers distribute traffic and provide additional protection against volumetric attacks. Your CTO thinks your AWS account was hacked. What's the only way to know for certain if there was unauthorized access and what they did? Assuming your hackers are very sophisticated engineers doing everything they can to cover their tracks. Use CloudTrail log file integrity validation. CloudTrail log file integrity validation uses cryptographic hashing to detect if files have been modified or deleted, providing the only reliable way to ensure log integrity against sophisticated attackers who might attempt to cover their tracks. A company is developing a highly resilient application to be hosted on multiple EC2s. App will store highly sensitive user data in RDS tables. The app must include migration to a different AWS region in the app disaster recovery plan. Provide a full audit trail of encryption key administration events. Allow only custom company admins to administer keys and protect data at rest using application layer encryption. Why should the security engineer choose Cloud HSM over KMS for encryption key management in this situation? HSM provides the ability to copy keys to a different region, while KMS doesn't. HSM allows you to extract and migrate keys to a different region for disaster recovery scenarios, while KMS keys are region-specific and cannot be directly migrated, making HSM the better choice for cross-region disaster recovery requirements. A company wants to ensure that its AWS resources can be launched only in the US East 1 and US West 2 regions. What's the most operationally efficient solution to prevent developers from launching EC2s in other regions? Use an organization, an AWS organization, attach a service control policy that allows all actions when the AWS requested region condition key is either US East 1 or US West 2. Delete the full AWS access policy. SCPs provide centralized governance across all accounts in an organization. Using the AWS requested region condition key automatically enforces regional restrictions without requiring individual account configuration. A company's security team receives an email notification from the Amazon EC2 abuse team that one or more of the company's EC2s may have been compromised. Which combination of actions should the team take to respond to the incident? Respond to the notification and list the actions that have been taken to address the incident, and detach the internet gateway from the VPC, remove all rules that contain 0.0.0 from the security groups, and create a NACL rule to deny all traffic inbound from the internet. Proper incident response includes communicating with AWS about remediation actions and immediately isolating compromised instances by removing internet connectivity while preserving evidence for forensic analysis. A company is using Macie, Firewall Manager, Inspector, and Shield Advance in its AWS account. The company wants to receive alerts if DDoS attacks occur against the account. What solution will meet this requirement? Create a CloudWatch alarm that monitors Shield Advanced metrics for an active DDoS event. Shield Advanced provides CloudWatch metrics specifically for DDoS attack detection and mitigation. Creating CloudWatch alarms on these metrics provides automated alerting when attacks are detected. A company is running internal microservices on Amazon ECS with the EC2 launch type. The company is using ECR private repos. A security engineer needs to encrypt the private repos using the KMS and analyze the container images for any common vulnerabilities and exposure CVEs. What would meet these requirements? Recreate the ECR repos with KMS encryption and ECR scanning enabled. Analyze the scan report after the next push of images. ECR encryption and scanning must be enabled at the repo creation. The integrated ECR scanning feature automatically analyzes pushed images for CVEs and provides detailed scan reports. A business stores website images in a S3 bucket. The firm serves the photos to end users through CloudFront. The firm learned lately that photographs are being accessible from countries in which it does not have a distribution license. What steps should the business take to safeguard the photographs and restrict their distribution? Update the S3 bucket policy to restrict access to a CloudFront Origin Access Identity, OAI, and add a CloudFront geo-restriction deny list of countries where the company lacks a license. Implementing CloudFront geo-restrictions blocks access from specified countries, while OAI ensures that content can only be accessed through CloudFront, preventing direct S3 access that could bypass geographic restrictions.